Have you ever watched one of those like crazy bartending competitions? You know, where the bottles are like flying and the music is like pumping and the crowd is going crazy. It's
Yeah,
a whole spectacle, right?
absolutely.
But there's like a whole layer
Yeah.
that most people never really think about.
Mm.
And that is like the judging side of it. Like,
Right.
how do they actually score these things?
Yeah,
It's more complicated than you might think.
it really is.
So today, we are going to do a deep dive into all the nuances of judging these crazy bartending competitions.
Awesome.
We are going to be using some insights from this article called The Flair Judge POV.
Okay.
And it's going to give us like a really cool behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to judge these incredible displays of skill.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the first things that, like, jumps out at me is this whole idea of, like, drops, right?
Yeah.
Like, you see a bartender, you know, they're flipping bottles, they're doing all this crazy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and something falls to the ground.
Right.
Everyone gasps.
Happens all the time.
But, like, are all drops created equal?
No, that's a great question. Not all drops are created equal. There's a big difference between what we call a silly drop and a big drop.
Okay, so break that down for me.
Okay, so picture this. You've got a bartender, they're making a really elaborate cocktail, and they're using like a cocktail stick with a cherry on it.
Right.
And that cherry like just slips off the stick and falls into the tin.
Oh.
That's a silly drop, you know? It might cost them a point or two. It's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
But then you have the big drop.
Oh.
Where the bartender, they're doing some crazy move.
Right.
And the entire shaker like flies across the stage.
Oh, my gosh.
That is a big drop.
Yeah.
And it's not just because it's visually jarring,
Right.
but it shows a lack of control.
Yeah.
And it can lead to like way more significant point deductions, especially in the execution category.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, I get the whole drop thing, but there's this other thing called a fumble
Oh, yeah.
that's a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
Yeah. So, like, a fumble is when the bartender almost drops something.
Right. It's that moment where like everything like slows down
Yeah.
and you see them like almost lose control of a bottle or a shaker or something, but they manage to catch it at the last second. Like
Oh.
right before it hits the ground. And you're like, oh, that was close.
But they still get penalized for that.
Yeah, because it still shows like a slight break in their composure and control.
Interesting.
It's not as bad as a full-on drop,
Right.
but it can still be distracting and affect the overall impression of the routine.
Okay.
And actually, the International Bartenders Association, or IBA, which is like the, you know, the big kahuna for these competitions,
Right.
they have specific rules about fumbles in their guidelines.
Really?
Yeah, because they recognize that even these near drops, they
Mm.
can impact the performance just as much as a full-blown drop in some cases.
Okay, so now I'm thinking about the judge.
Right.
Like, how do you, as a judge, even start to score something that's, like, nuanced and subtle?
It's tough, you know?
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the trickiest parts of being a judge.
Okay.
You have to be like hyper aware,
Yeah.
like laser focus, right? And you have to be consistent in how you evaluate those fumbles.
Okay.
So, for instance, a tiny little fumble.
Yeah.
You know, like they almost drop a bottle but quickly regain control. That might only cost them like half a point in the composure category.
Right.
While a more dramatic fumble, like where they almost drop an entire shaker, that could be a 2-point deduction in execution.
Got it.
It all comes down to like how severe the fumble was
Yeah.
and how much it affected the flow and like the overall feel of the routine.
So, okay, we've got drops, we've got fumbles, and then you add on top of that all these different scoring categories.
Oh, yeah.
You've got like originality and difficulty and execution and composure, and sometimes even relevance to like a specific theme.
It's a lot to juggle.
It's a lot, right?
All right.
So how do judges balance all of those things?
It's kind of like figure skating in a way.
Okay.
You're not just looking at like the individual tricks or moves. Yeah.
You're looking at how they're woven together, how they tell a story, how they flow.
Interesting.
It's about the overall performance, the artistry.
Right.
So you could have two bartenders who do the exact same trick,
Mm-hmm.
but the one who like seamlessly integrates that trick into their routine
Yeah.
and like builds a narrative around it through their movements,
Yeah.
that bartender's going to score way higher in categories like originality and even difficulty.
Because they made it look effortless.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
it's not just about the trick itself, it's how it all comes together. So, like, if we go back to our drop cherry example,
Okay.
One tiny little drop cherry, that shouldn't ruin a bartender's whole performance, right?
No, not at all. One small mistake isn't going to make or break a routine.
Okay.
It's all about the bigger picture.
Okay.
But if a bartender is consistently making those small mistakes, like dropping cherries or fumbling with bottles,
Yeah.
then that starts to become a pattern.
And that pattern can affect their scores across the board, especially in categories like difficulty and choreography.
Because it shows a lack of consistency.
Exactly.
Okay, so then there's this whole debate about like transparency in judging.
Right.
And one of the things that the Flair Judge POV article brought up was this idea of public score sheets.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So like
I
imagine
love that idea.
after each bartender performs,
Yeah.
their score sheet like pops up on a screen for everyone to see.
Exactly.
And it shows like exactly how the judges scored them in each category.
Right, like a breakdown.
Yeah, and like even maybe some notes from the judges.
Like feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
So what do you think about that? Like, do you think public score sheets are a good idea?
I think it's a fantastic idea. Transparency is so important in any competition. And public source sheets would not only give valuable feedback to the competitors,
Right.
but they would also like hold the judges accountable for their decisions. And I think it would help the audience understand the judging process better.
Totally.
You know, give them more insight into what the judges are looking for.
Yeah, and it would be really cool to see like, oh, this bartender got like a perfect score in originality,
Right.
but they lost some points in execution because of those fumbles.
Exactly.
I think it would just add a whole other layer to the competition.
It would.
Okay, so let's circle back to drops for a second,
Okay.
because I feel like they get a lot of attention.
They do.
But like, really, is one drop that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things?
I think it depends.
Okay.
It's all about context, right?
Mhm.
Think of a bartending routine as like a story.
Okay.
That's got a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
And those drops are like disruptions in the narrative.
Interesting.
They break the flow, they make the routine feel less polished, and honestly, they can lower the perceived difficulty of the performance.
So it's not just about the points.
Yeah.
It's about the overall impression.
Exactly. A clean, well-executed routine just looks more impressive and professional.
Right.
It's like the difference between like reading a book that's got like coffee stains all over it
Right.
versus like a pristine copy. You know,
Yeah.
a story's the same,
Yeah,
but the experience is different.
right.
So yeah, those drops, they matter.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the bartenders and the drops and the fumbles,
Right.
but let's not forget about the people who are like making all the tough calls,
Yeah.
the judges.
The unsung heroes.
They're the ones who are really shaping the competition.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about like what makes a good judge in these competitions.
Well, first and foremost, a good judge needs experience.
Makes sense.
They need to have a deep understanding of bartending and flair.
Right.
They need to know the techniques. They need to know the history. They need to know like what makes a routine truly exceptional.
Yeah.
They also need to be like super objective.
Right.
You know, they can't let personal preferences or biases influence their scoring. They have to be able to watch each routine with a fresh perspective
Okay.
and evaluate it based on its own merits.
So they're really like the gatekeepers of the competition in a way.
They are, yeah.
They're ensuring that the scoring is fair and consistent.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I'm thinking about like the stakes
Yeah.
in these competitions.
Mm-hmm.
Because often there's like a lot of prize money on the line
Oh, yeah. Big time.
for the winners.
Right.
But like, are the judges getting compensated fairly for their expertise?
That's a great question. And it's something that I think the industry needs to address more seriously.
Okay.
You know, you have these judges who are responsible for making decisions that can impact the careers of these bartenders.
Hmm.
And they're often working long hours, right?
They're under a lot of pressure to be accurate and fair,
Yeah.
and yet they're often not paid what they're worth.
Unfortunately, that's true.
And it's not like they need to be paid like rock stars.
Right.
But their compensation should reflect the importance of their role.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing their expertise and the value they bring to the competition.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you're asking someone to dedicate their time and energy to judging a high-stakes competition,
Right.
you need to make sure they're compensated fairly.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're not going to attract the best talent.
that's a good point.
And that ultimately hurts the integrity of the competition.
So what can be done about this?
Well, the Flair Judge POV actually lays out some pretty specific proposals for how to improve the judging system.
Okay, lay them on me.
First, they suggest creating clearer and more consistent deduction guidelines for things like drops, fumbles, and assists.
Makes sense.
That way, all the judges are on the same page,
Yeah.
and the bartenders know exactly what to expect.
Right.
Second, they propose using public score sheets with like detailed notes from the judges.
We talked about that, yeah.
We did, but it's worth repeating
Right.
because it would make the judging process so much more transparent and accountable. And finally, they argue that we need to invest in attracting and retaining experienced judges
Right.
by offering them fair compensation, professional development opportunities, and just like overall respect for their expertise.
Yeah.
We need to make judging these competitions a desirable position
I like it.
so that we can get the best people in those seats.
So we've really gone deep here.
Yeah, we have.
We've gone beyond those like flashy bottle spins
And the fancy pours.
and explored like the whole world of judging in bartending competitions.
It's a fascinating world.
It is, and it's a world that most people don't even think about.
Right.
So next time you see one of these amazing displays of skill,
Yeah.
maybe you'll like notice those subtle fumbles a little bit more.
Right.
Or like appreciate the judge's role in like evaluating every single move.
For sure.
And maybe you'll even start to wonder about like the bigger picture.
Mhm.
Like, are the judges being compensated fairly?
Yeah.
Is the scoring system transparent enough? And how can we make these competitions even better for everyone involved?
Those are the important questions.
They are. And hopefully, with continued discussion and action, we can create a more like transparent and equitable system
Right.
that benefits the competitors, the judges, and of course the audience,
It's all about making the competition the best it can be.
for everyone involved.
Exactly.
That's a great place to end it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Thanks so much for joining me for this deep dive.
This was fun. I'm glad we did this.
Me too, I learned a lot.
Me too.
All right, well, until next time.
Sounds good.
Cheers.
Cheers.